The Galactic Council's broadcast began with their usual pompous fanfare, all 15 notes of what they called music, though it sounded more like a dying space whale having an argument with a garbage compactor. The council loved their ceremonies. They were about to love this one a lot less. High Arbiter Zacian of the Valdorian Dominion adjusted his ceremonial neck frills as the cameras focused on his elongated face. The frills, genetic markers of his superior breeding, sparkled with bioluminescent pride. How wonderful that trillions of beings across the galaxy would witness his moment of delivering justice. How tragic that his career would end approximately 6 hours later with a human tactical team introducing his brain to the concept of rapid atmospheric decompression. We gather today. He intoned in that insufferably formal way council members had perfected over millennia to witness justice being served upon a grave transgressor against galactic peace. The cameras panned to Emma Chen, a 12-year-old girl in a simple white tunic, standing with peculiar calmness for someone so young. Her black hair was neatly trimmed to regulation length. Heaven forbid a human child have non-regulation hair in their final moments. The Galactic Council was nothing if not obsessed with proper procedure. The accused, Zixtal continued, has been found guilty of cultural contamination of the first degree. The evidence is irrefutable. The evidence, as it turned out, was Emma teaching a group of young Valdorian children how to play hopscotch. The horror, the scandal, the complete and utter disruption of their carefully cultivated youth development protocols. Who knew that showing alien children how to have fun could be classified as a capital offense? In the viewing galleries, representatives of 1,000 species watched with varying degrees of interest. The Heisrek, with their compound eyes, recorded everything for their vast archives that would mysteriously vanish within a week. The Malorians, legendary for their emotional sensitivity, were already weeping. The Krek simply looked bored, their chitinous faces impossible to read. None of them knew they were watching the beginning of their civilization's end. Does the accused wish to make a final statement? Zyke's tail asked, his secondary breathing vents fluttering with barely concealed satisfaction. Emma Chen looked straight into the camera. Not at the council, not at her executioners, but directly into the lens that broadcasted to every human settlement across the galaxy. Her voice was clear, steady, and far too mature for her age. Mom, Dad, I'm not afraid. And I'm sorry about skipping piano practice last week. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't the usual kind of last statement they were used to. No begging, no grand pronouncements, just a child apologizing for missing piano practice. The sheer humanity of it would haunt them in their... The execution itself was supposed to be civilized, clinical, humane. Though the irony of that word seemed lost on the council, a simple neural disruptor, painless and quick. The device hummed to life, a soft blue glow enveloping Emma's small form. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes, a small smile on her face as if remembering a favorite joke. The blue light pulsed once, and Emma Chen, age 12, pianist, hopscotch enthusiast, and convicted cultural contaminator, crumpled to the ground. Across human space, the silence was deafening. Restaurants fell quiet. Shipyards went still. Even the endless chatter of digital communications seemed to pause for one terrible moment. In that silence, in that collective intake of breath across 1,000 worlds, humanity made a decision. The kind of cold, terrible decision that species make when they realize that civility has failed, that diplomacy has failed, that everything has failed. High Arbiter Zyxes smiled at the cameras one final time, declared justice served, and closed the broadcast. In the coming days, he would learn that justice was a concept humans understood far better than he could have imagined. And they were about to provide the galaxy with a thorough education. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came 3 minutes after the broadcast ended. The Galactic Council's congratulatory messages to High Arbiter Zyxes all bounced back undelivered. Human communication networks had gone completely dark. No warnings, no threats, no furious denouncements, just silence. The second sign came when human politicians, normally so eager to appease the council, stopped answering calls. The human ambassador's office on Centauri Prime simply closed, the staff leaving so quietly that the Malorian emissary next door didn't notice until hours later. The building remained empty, save for a small hollow picture left on the main desk, showing Emma Chen winning a school science fair. In the Terran Military Command, Admiral Helena Reyes watched the recording for the 18th time. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched since the first viewing. Around her, the command center hummed with quiet, purposeful activity. No orders needed to be given. Every human in uniform knew exactly what Protocol Zero meant. 6 months earlier, Emma Chen had been exactly where any 12-year-old should be, in school. The Valdorian Cultural Exchange Program had seemed like a wonderful idea at the time. Build bridges between species, let the children learn from each other. Emma, with her infectious laugh and inability to sit still, had been chosen as a student ambassador. She just wants to play with us. A young Valdorian had testified at her trial. She makes learning fun. The horror in the prosecutor's voice when translating this statement would have been comical if it hadn't led to this. Across human space, ships began to move. Not the flashy patrol vessels that aliens were used to seeing. These were different, darker, quieter, built for purposes that humanity had hoped never to need, in underground bunkers and hidden asteroid bases. Weapons designed specifically for each council race were being prepared. Humanity had spent centuries studying their new neighbors, learning every weakness, preparing for every contingent, just in case. The HFY ambassador shifted uncomfortably in his encounter suit as he watched the human news channels go dark one by one. His species prided themselves on pattern recognition, and this pattern was setting off every ancestral warning signal in his compound. They're up to something. He chittered to his aide. Alert the council, but the council was busy congratulating themselves on upholding galactic law. Higher Beater Zixtal was already drafting his memoirs, planning to title them Justice Served, a legacy of he would never get past the first chapter. In a small apartment on Mars, Emma's parents sat in silence, surrounded by neighbors who had no words to offer. On the wall, Emma's calendar still showed her scheduled piano recital for next week. A half-finished homework assignment lay on her desk, the last question forever unanswered. The calm stretched on. Hour after hour of unnatural quiet, humans went about their daily routines with mechanical precision. They bought groceries. They walked their dogs. They picked up their children from school, holding them just a little tighter than usual. And in high orbit around Earth, the first fleet of ghost ships slipped their moorings and vanished into the dark between stars, carrying with them humanity's response to the murder of a child. The storm was coming, and it would be glorious. The Krek's defense minister was having a terrible day. First, 3 of their frontier outposts had gone silent. Then a patrol fleet disappeared without sending a single distress signal, and now his breakfast was getting cold while he tried to explain to the council why this was definitely, absolutely nothing to worry about. Routine communications disruption. He clicked through his mandibles, antennae twitching in what his species recognized as barely concealed panic. Probably solar interference in 17 different star systems. Simultaneously, even the council members, not known for their brilliant deductive reasoning, seemed skeptical of that explanation. The Malorian representative, Soft Song at Dawn, rose from her hovering meditation pod. Has anyone else noticed that these disruptions form a pattern? Her melodic voice carried an edge of worry. On the star map, the silent zones created a shape that looked suspiciously like an arrow, pointing directly at the council's home system. Preposterous. High Arbiter Zixail declared, his neck frills now a nervous shade of green. Humans are a civilized species. They understand the necessity of law and order. He neglected to mention that his personal yacht was currently being prepped for an extended vacation to the galactic rim, just in case. Reports kept trickling in. A luxury cruise ship found drifting in space, its security logs showing nothing but static. A mining colony evacuated after all its atmospheric processors simultaneously developed the same mysterious malfunction. A Hasric data center wiped clean, except for a single file containing the sheet music for a human piano concerto. In the Valdorian capital, a group of schoolchildren, the same ones Emma had taught hopscotch to, began drawing strange patterns in the dust of their recreation pods. When asked what they were doing, They replied in unison, waiting for the humans to come play. Their teachers reported this incident to Planetary Security. Planetary Security reported it to the Council. The Council promptly filed it under harmless cultural anomalies and continued their deliberations on whether to raise the price of parking permits in Council space. The TAC, a species that prided themselves on their predictive algorithms, began picking up anomalies in human behavior patterns. Their massive quantum computers spat out warning after warning, all of which pointed to the same conclusion. Something unprecedented was. Look at this footage, a junior analyst chittered to his superior. The video showed humans in a shopping district on Mars. They're smiling, all of them, constantly. That's not normal human behavior. His superior promptly fired him for being paranoid. The superior was then promptly fired himself in a much more permanent way. Approximately 3 days later, the council called an emergency session to discuss the growing unease. They passed 17 new regulations about proper communication protocols, approved funding for a new ceremonial fountain in the council chamber, and roundly ignored the fact that their private security forces were quietly requesting transfers to distant in orbit around a forgotten brown dwarf. A Rick science vessel detected an energy signature they couldn't identify. Before they could report it, they watched in fascination as space itself seemed to ripple. The last thing they recorded was a human voice, calm and professional, speaking 6 words: "Thank you for your cooperation. Good night." The council's finest xenopsychologists gathered to analyze human behavior. They produced a 1,000-page report that could be summarized in 3 words. And still the silence stretched on. Still the shadows between stars grew darker. Still the pattern of disappearances spread like a cancer through councils. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided this would be an excellent time to raise taxes on human worlds. The motion passed unanimously. The humans didn't protest. They didn't complain. They just smiled and kept preparing. And in a secure council facility, in a drawer that hadn't been opened since the trial, Emma Chen's personal effects lay neatly cataloged. A hair ribbon, a small digital tablet containing her homework, and a piece of chalk she had used to draw hopscotch squares. The chalk was missing. No one had noticed. No one would live long enough to. The first strike came during the Galactic Council's annual budget meeting. How fitting that they were arguing about import taxes on luxury goods when humanity decided to reveal what they'd been importing for the past 3 centuries. Admiral Helena Reyes stood on the bridge of the TNS Nemesis, a ship that officially didn't exist. Around her, crew members worked with the practiced efficiency of people who had trained for this moment their entire careers. On her command screen, green lights flickered across the galaxy map as hidden human fleets reported ready. Protocol. Children of Earth is now active, she announced, her voice carrying to every human vessel. Remember, Emma? The response came back in a whisper repeated by millions of voices. Remember, Emma? The Valdorian home fleet was the first to learn why you should never trust human shipping manifestos. 300 cargo containers delivered over the past decade and stored in their orbital warehouses simultaneously shed their disguise. The tax-evading luxury goods inside turned out to be something far more interesting: automated weapon platforms specifically designed to target Valdorian ships' thermal exhaust vents. High Arbiter Zixtal watched from his escape yacht as his species-proud armada was methodically dissected by weapons they'd unknowingly stored for years. The humans had even paid the storage fees, punctured with interest. On Ozaric Prime, their much-vaunted planetary defense grid encountered an interesting problem. Every command computer simultaneously began playing a recording of a children's piano recital. The last recital Emma Chen would never give. The Agerix compound eyes could only watch in horror as their defensive satellites turned inward. But we studied their technology, screamed the Hayes Rick defense coordinator as his bunker's doors were systematically breached. We knew everything about their weapons, no, replied the human operative, who finally reached him. You knew everything we wanted you to know. The Krex tried to mobilize their dreaded shock troops, only to discover that the neural implants controlling their warriors had been compromised decades ago. Apparently, the human corporate subsidiary that manufactured the implants' cooling systems had included some interesting subsystems. The entire Krex army received an involuntary stand-down order, accompanied by a brief message. Time for a timeout. In the council chambers, now crowded with panicking representatives, the Malorian ambassador's soft song at dawn finally understood. They were never defenseless, she sang mournfully. They were never disorganized. Every trade deal, every technology exchange, every cultural program was a way to study our weaknesses. Finished her aide, watching as the chamber's supposedly unhackable security systems locked them all inside. Even the cultural exchange program that brought Emma Chen to our worlds, the humans had turned everything they had learned through centuries of peaceful contact into weapons. The TIG's atmospheric requirements, documented in medical exchange programs, now being used to modify their air into something distinctly the Malorian sensitive audio receptors, studied in joint musical projects, currently being bombarded with frequencies that left them conscious but unable to concentrate. Humanity had built their revenge like they built everything else, methodically, thoroughly, and with it. Admiral Reyes watched as another tactical display lit up with confirmations. The Krex shipyards neutralized. The HFY data centers wiped. The Voldorian defense platforms subverted. 3 centuries of careful preparation executed in Phase 1 complete, her tactical officer reported. All preliminary targets neutralized. Minimal casualties as ordered. They're disabled but alive. Good, Reyes nodded. They need to be alive to stand trial. Comets Phase 2. Across council space, human ships emerged from hiding. Not the sleek diplomatic vessels or lumbering cargo haulers they were used to seeing. These were different beasts entirely. Black shapes that seemed to drink in light, bristling with weapons designed specifically for each species they would face. In his rapidly retreating yacht, High Arbiter Zixtao received a transmission. Just a simple text message, but it made his neck frills turn pure white with terror. The defendant wishes to appeal your verdict. Court will reconvene shortly. A human battle group dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of his vessel. Their weapons weren't powered up. They didn't need to be. They just herded his yacht back toward council space with the same patient, methodical efficiency that had characterized everything humanity had done. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had never forgotten how to wage war. They had just gotten much better at it while pretending they had. And somewhere, in the vast darkness between stars, a piece of chalk floated in zero gravity, still carrying traces of the DNA of a 12-year-old girl who had just wanted to teach aliens how to play. The Galactic Council had very specific protocols for almost everything. Protocol 7249B covered proper waste disposal. Protocol 8891C detailed the correct way to archive meeting minutes. They even had Protocol 9032X for what to do if someone used the wrong fork at a diplomatic dinner. They had no protocol for what to do when humanity decided to go hunting. The TXF Chief Justice learned this the hard way when he woke up to find his entire security detail had been replaced. Not killed, not harmed, just relocated to a rather nice beach resort on a human colony world. They'd even been left good reviews on their performance before being sedated and moved. "Good morning, Your Honor," said the human operative sitting at his bedroom desk. "We're here to discuss your role in the Chen case. I brought coffee. I heard you like it with 3 sugars." The fact that the human knew his coffee preference was terrifying enough. The fact that they'd brought his favorite brand from Earth was somehow worse. Across council space, similar scenes played out with clockwork precision. The Voldorian prosecutor who'd argued for Emma's execution found his private estate surrounded by human ships. They just hovered there, silent, their running lights spelling out knock knock in Valdorian script. The HFY data analyst who'd processed Emma's confession discovered that every electronic device in his home was now playing a recording of children laughing. The same laugh, over and over. Emma's laugh, taken from security footage of her playing with her Voldorian friends. "Why are you doing this?" He chittered at the shadows. "Why not just kill us?" Because, came a voice from those shadows, "We want you to understand what you did. And death is quick. Understanding takes time." The council members who had voted unanimously for Emma's execution tried to run. They weren't very good at it. Centuries of bureaucratic comfort hadn't prepared them for life on the run. One by one, they were found. The Malorian representative was discovered in a meditation retreat, trying to find inner peace. The human operatives let him finish his meditation session before taking him into custody. They were nothing if not polite. The Krex delegate attempted to hide in a mining colony. The miners, it turned out, had some interesting thoughts about council members who sentenced children to death. They gift-wrapped him for the humans, literally, with a bow. High Arbiter ZC's Kale, architect of what history would call the greatest mistake, tried to buy sanctuary from the criminal cartels operating in the Galactic Rim. The cartels, displaying a previously unknown sense of self-preservation, politely declined his business and sent his coordinates to the humans. Smart business decision, commented Admiral Reyes when she heard. Unlike some people, the cartels can read writing on the wall. The hunt wasn't just military. Human civilians played their part. Every alien tourist destination suddenly had very detailed records of council members' vacation homes. Every luxury goods store remembered exactly what they'd purchased. Even the street food vendors knew which council delegate had a weakness for fried centauri and squid. The Galactic news networks, still operating under council control, tried to paint humanity as savage aggressors, right up until human hackers replaced their broadcasts with security footage from Emma's cell. Hours of a 12-year-old girl doing her homework, practicing piano fingering exercises in the air, and teaching her guards to play patty cake. The guards had been quite good at it, actually. When the humans came for them, they were offered a choice. Those who had shown kindness to Emma were given sanctuary. Those who hadn't were given time to reflect on their choices. But we were just following orders, protested one Valdorian administrator as human operators systematically downloaded his funny thing about that excuse, replied the human technician, not looking up from her work. We had about 3 centuries to think about it. Didn't hold up well in human history either. The last council member was found trying to disguise himself as a maintenance worker on a deep space station. He might have succeeded if he hadn't instinctively complained about the quality of the station's food. Old habits die hard. When it was done, when the last of those responsible had been collected, humanity sent one final message to the galaxy at large. Justice will be served, this time properly. Court will convene in one standard week. Attendance is mandatory for the accused, optional for everyone else. But we recommend watching. It's important to learn from history. For Emma, Alpirin's message was signed simply. In holding cells across human space, the architects of Emma's death waited. The cells were comfortable, clean, and followed all council regulations for proper prisoner treatment. The humans were very insistent about following proper procedures. After all, they'd learned from the best. The trial began exactly as the council's broadcast had, with ceremonial music. Except this time, it was a recording of Emma Chen's last piano recital, the piece she had been practicing when they took her, which is Prelude in C major, played by small hands that would never touch keys again. The viewing figures across the galaxy made the Super Bowl look like a local bake sale. The courtroom was an exact replica of the council chamber where they had condemned Emma. Every ornate decoration, every ceremonial banner, every pretentious symbol of authority, recreated in perfect detail. The only difference was the judge's platform, now scaled for human height. High Justice Maria Chen sat where High Arbiter Zix's tail had once presided. Emma's aunt, the council members hadn't known that when they rejected her diplomatic appeals for clemency, an oversight that their lawyers were now frantically adding to their defense documents, the trial of the Galactic Council versus humanity will now commence. She announced, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of prepared vengeance. The charges are as follows. The list took 2 hours to read. The humans had been very thorough in their documentation. This is irregular, protested the Krex defendant's lawyer. Under council law, we're using council law. Justice Chen interrupted smoothly. Every regulation, every precedent, every single legal principle you used to justify murdering my niece. I do hope you weren't planning to argue against your own legal system. The lawyer sat down very quickly. The evidence was presented with meticulous precision, centuries of council decisions, thousands of cases where non-council races had been subjected to cultural protection laws. The humans had archived everything. Let's discuss Cultural Contamination Statute 47B. The prosecutor smiled, the one used to condemn Emma. Interesting thing about that law, it was originally written to prevent technological contamination of pre-spaceflight civilizations. Would anyone like to explain how it came to be used against a child playing hops? The council members looked at their feet. No takers? Well, let's examine the voting record for that particular interpretation, starting with the private financial transactions that preceded it. After hour, the humans laid bare 3 centuries of corruption, prejudice, and bureaucratic cruelty. They didn't need to manufacture evidence. The council had documented everything themselves, secure in their belief that no one would ever dare challenge them. In the public galleries, alien citizens watched with growing horror as their government's true nature was exposed. The Valdorian children Emma had played with were brought in to testify. They had never stopped playing hopscotch. They had taught it to others. Cultural contamination, it seemed, was contagious. The defense may present its case. Justice Chen announced after 3 days of prosecution testimony. The council members' collective defense lasted exactly 7 minutes. It might have gone longer if they hadn't kept contradicting each other's desperate attempts to shift blame. When the verdict was read, no one was surprised. The humans had built their case as carefully as they had built their hidden fleets. In accordance with council law, Justice Chen's voice carried across the galaxy. This court finds the defendants guilty of judicial murder, abuse of power, corruption of legal process, and crimes against sentient beings. She paused, letting the moment stretch. Is not death. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Death would be quick, simple. You didn't grant that mercy to Emma. Instead, you will live. You will live to see everything you built dismantled, your laws rewritten, your powers stripped away, your names remembered only as a cautionary tale. The sentence was carried out immediately. The council was dissolved. A new galactic assembly would be formed, with representation from all spacefaring races. The humans had already drafted the charter. They'd had centuries to work on it. As the former council members were led away to begin their life sentences of community service, in the very cultures they had tried to protect, Justice Chen made one final announcement. Court is adjourned. But before we close, one final piece of evidence has been submitted. A hologram appeared in the center of the courtroom. Emma Chen, age 12, teaching alien children to play hopscotch. Laughing, dancing. This is what you feared, Justice Chen said softly. This is what you killed. Remember that. Court dismissed. The galaxy would remember. The humans would make sure of it. 10 years after the trial, a new monument was unveiled in front of the Galactic Assembly building. A simple hopscotch court carved in eternal diamond with a small plaque that read, Emma Chen, she just wanted to play. The former High Arbiter Zyxide, now working as a junior teacher's assistant in a Valdorian primary school, watched the ceremony on public broadcast. His students had insisted. They particularly enjoyed the part where human children and alien youngsters jumped together across the numbered squares. Cultural contamination was now the official policy of the Galactic Assembly. They called it the Chen Protocol, the mandatory exchange of games, music, and laughter between species. Turned out the galaxy was a much more interesting place when people were allowed to share their joy. Admiral Reyes, now retired, sometimes gave lectures at the Galactic War College. Her favorite topic was how to hide an arsenal in plain sight, the art of looking harmless. The lecture always ended with a recording of Emma's last words. The part about skipping piano practice usually got a laugh, followed by a thoughtful silence. The humans had kept their weapons, of course. They just didn't hide them anymore. The black ships still patrolled, their hulls now bearing a new insignia, a piece of chalk crossed with a piano key. The other species found this somehow more terrifying than any traditional military symbol. Humanity's reputation had changed. Gone was the image of the bumbling newcomers to galactic society. Now, when humans smiled and offered trade deals, everyone read the fine print. Very carefully, multiple times, preferably with a lawyer present. The HFY had developed a particular appreciation for human music. Their data centers now regularly hosted concerts, though they still twitched nervously whenever someone played back. The Malorians had written epics about the Great Justice, though they tended to skip over the part where their own representative had tried to hide in a meditation retreat. Some things were better left to the historian. The Kreks had fundamentally reorganized their society after discovering that blind obedience to authority wasn't actually a survival trait. Their new constitution began with the words "question everything." Their former council member, still serving his sentence, had recently been voted most improved in critical thinking skills by his rehabilitation group. In the new Galactic Assembly, the human delegation maintained a peculiar tradition. Their main conference room contained a single child's desk, permanently empty, with a fresh piece of chalk laid across it every morning. Humanity had changed too. They were still explorers, traders, diplomats, but now everyone knew what lay beneath the friendly smiles. They had revealed themselves as master strategists who could hold a grudge for centuries and turn even piano lessons into tactical advantages. The former council members, those who had voted for Emma's execution, continued their sentenced community service. They taught alien children about law, justice, and consequences. Most of them had actually gotten quite good at hopscotch, though they'd never admit it publicly. Some said humanity had been too harsh. Others said not harsh enough, but no one, in all the years that followed, ever again suggested executing a child for teaching others how to play. On Earth, in a small museum in what used to be Emma's hometown, there was a special display. A piano, perpetually tuned and ready, sat next to a collection of chalk and a worn copy of Bach's Preludes. Every year, children from across the galaxy came to play both the music, and the game. The galaxy had learned many lessons from the Chen incident, as historians called it, about justice, about consequences, about the danger of bureaucracy unchecked by compassion. But perhaps the most important lesson was the simplest, now taught in every school across known space. Never mistake kindness for weakness, never confuse civilization with superiority, and never ever mess with a species that would spend 3 centuries planning revenge for a crime not yet committed. Children are the future. They had meant it. The chalk marks from Emma's last hopscotch game had long since faded from the Valdorian school courtyard, but her legacy was etched across the stars themselves, in the laughter of children from 1,000 worlds playing together under the light of distant suns. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the new Galactic Assembly, there was still Protocol Zero, just in case. After all, humans were now very, very good at following proper procedures.